Today's speaker is Manuel Galvan. I've known Manuel for 50 years, half a century.
Since kindergarten.
Gee, I wish. He is a strategist, well known in Chicago circles. He works with corporations to strengthen their brand, help build relationships, and direct government affairs. Popular topics for his corporate presentations include dealing with the press, how to optimize government relations, and getting the most out of networking opportunities. As president of Vantage Point Marketing, he has worked with clients on 3 continents, including government officials and political candidates. Prior to launching Vantage Point 27 years ago, he covered City Hall for the Chicago Tribune, before going on to the newspaper's editorial board to handle his political endorsements. This afternoon, he will discuss bare knuckle politics and analyze the Chicago mayoral election. Please welcome political analyst Manuel Galvan.
Thank you, Walter, not just for being such a good friend for half a century, but being a fraternity brother and not sharing a lot of stories. You know, as a political analyst and in the political world, you have to be very quick on your feet. So, two quick changes that I just found out about coming in. One is that I was not allotted an hour and a half for my remarks. So they will be cut down. Second of all, Pancho said, do you mind if we tape this? And I said, no, but that means no, a lot of political jokes for you guys you're not gonna hear. But that's okay, because I recall reading that Will Rogers said the problem with political jokes is sometimes they get elected. How many here have already voted? Okay, well, when you do vote, and I hope you do your civic duty, after you vote and you turn in your card, you will get one of these, which is a wristband that says, I know you can't see it in the back, I voted, did you? Very important. And of course, if you vote in Chicago, and I have to introduce also, I want to introduce another good friend, my technical wizard, Ron Litke, who is not only going to be doing the slides while I'm speaking, because I don't do 2 things at once. But very importantly, since we're talking about the history of Chicago politics, Ron Litke was the press spokesman for the Chicago Corporation Council under Mayor Harold Washington. How about a round of applause for my guy? Okay, so here you go. Last September 3rd was Labor Day, and while there was no vacation, you may also recall that even though it was Labor Day, there was no vacation from political TV ads. You had Pritzker talking about what he was going to do, and then you had Rauner attacking Mike Madigan. On the Chicago scene, things were pretty quiet. We had an incumbent mayor that was raising a lot of money and well positioned to run for re-election. So, as I say, things were fairly quiet. But then, even though he was running for re-election, and even though that was not till the following year, there were already critics, and that happens when you're in a position of power. You will always have critics. So, there were already 13 candidates who have said that they were going to run against the mayor because they wanted to be mayor. And there are their pictures. We'll go into them. They're in alphabetical order, so just kind of follow along with the dots. Dorothy Brown, clerk of the circuit court, and she had run for mayor in 2007. Amara Enya, an activist and a policy consultant. She had run for mayor in 2015. Jamal Green, a community activist. William Kelly, a TV producer, who ran for mayor in 2015. And more recently, he ran for comptroller last year on the Republican side. John Kozlar, who was a two-time aldermanic candidate from the 11th Ward. Tony LaRouviere, former Chicago Public School principal. Lori Lightfoot, who spoke here recently, former federal prosecutor and head of the Chicago Police Force. Gary McCarthy, former police superintendent. Matthew Roney, political science student at DePaul. Who knows, maybe it was a class project. Neil Solis Griffin, a tech entrepreneur. Paul Vallis, who spoke here last month. He was former Chicago Public Schools CEO, and he ran for lieutenant governor in 2014. William Doc Walls, a businessman making his fourth run for mayor, if at first. And Willie Wilson, millionaire businessman who ran for mayor in 2015 and more recently ran for president in 2016. So that was Labor Day. Then the following day, September 4th, a political earthquake hit the Windy City. Rahm announced that he would not seek re-election. Within days, another 24 would-be mayors announced to run or pondered the move. Many declined and more jumped in. Don't worry, I'm not going to name any names. The governor's election came and went, and the incumbent governor conceded less than an hour after the polls closed. 3 weeks later, 21 candidates formally filed to be Chicago's mayor. Let's go to that one. Okay. Hold on that. So 21 candidates formally filed to be Chicago's mayor. But if wishes were horses, beggars would ride. There are several requirements that you have to check off and meet even before you raise the millions of dollars necessary for a mayoral campaign. So what are the requirements? Well, you have to have 12,500 valid signatures. Now, a valid signature, your opponent's lawyers can get very tricky. If, for instance, when you filed for your voter's card, you wrote John Alberts, and that was okay. But then you filed the petition Johnny Alberts, because you're more whimsical now. They could disallow that, because that's not an official signature. This is why I tell the candidates that I work with, and if you're thinking of running for mayor or something, let me know, we can work together. I tell them that they have to get at least 3 times the number of required signatures, because they can be knocked off for a lot of reasons. The notary that signs off on this, maybe their term expired. Maybe it was invalid because of that. There's tons of them. That's why they pay lawyers. Right, Mr. Garner? The second thing you need is a statement of candidacy. And in the statement of candidacy, you're saying that you've been a Chicago resident for at least a year and you haven't been convicted of a federal crime. Remember, this is before you become an elected official. Afterwards, it's Katie bar the door. Statement of economic interest confirms that you were not in arrears for any tax payment nor owe any fines to the city of Chicago. So you need all that. Now let's talk about the 21. Here we go. And we broke these down. Dorothy Brown, you remember her from the last slide. Gary Chico is a former chief of staff to Mayor Richard M. Daley, so you don't confuse him with the other Mayor Daley, well, we'll get to that. Corianne Clark, an 87-year-old community activist known affectionately in the neighborhood as Grandma Clark. Bill Daley, who was chief of staff to President Obama. Catherine Brown DeTycoon, who was a pastor and a life coach and ran for 21st Alderman in 2011. Amaya Enya, the policy consultant. Bob Fioretti, former 2nd Ward Alderman. LaShawn Ford, 8th District Sales Representative. And Jamal Green, community activist. We've got Jerry Joyce, a former assistant state's attorney who's running commercials on TV. John Kozlar, a previous aldermanic candidate. Okay, then we have Lori Lightfoot, Sandra Mallory, who is a West Englewood resident, an Army veteran, and a social worker. And then Richard Mayers. Now, Richard Mayers was not the Batman foe, the Riddler. The reason there's a question mark up there is because there's no photo of him available. Didn't hire me, so obviously you know. Gary McCarthy, Susanna Mendoza, Tony Preckwinkle, and Neil Sleeves Griffin. Then we also have, last but not least, Paul Vallis, former Chicago Public Schools CEO and a city budget director. Roger Washington, no relation to Errol, I believe, but this Roger is a Chicago police officer. And Willie Wilson, a man who made his millions with McDonald's franchises, or Mickey D. It seems that a lot of people wanted to be elected officials. In addition to the 21 candidates, there were 4 candidates that filed for clerk, 4 that filed for treasurer, and 210 candidates who filed for 50 aldermanic positions. Then came the torrential rainstorm from challengers and their election lawyers, who said that several of these opponents did not have enough ballot signatures. So there were objections, and these triggered hearings and reviews and more hearings. And with all these candidates running, there was so much time spent that the early voting that was to have begun January 17th now began January 28th. And that was if you came downtown to vote at the so-called Loop Super Site on Washington Street. If you wanted to vote near your home and your local library, that just started yesterday. Objections were filed against more than half of the mayoral candidates, and when the smoke cleared, a third had been knocked off the ballot. The most surprising, frankly, was Dorothy Brown, who's been an incumbent for so long that she's got name recognition, whatever she runs for. So you can always figure she's going to get at least 5% because of that name recognition. But she did not have enough ballot signatures. She threw her support, Dorothy threw her support behind Amara Enya. So that leaves us with 14 survivors, your choices for Chicago mayor. I'm going to touch very briefly, because I want to allow a lot of time for Q&A. I want to touch very briefly on strengths and weaknesses, or as they're called now, challenges. Gary Chico, he's Daley's former chief of staff. He's a former CPS board president. He's a former president of the Chicago Park District. He ran for U.S. Senate in 2004. and he ran for mayor in 2011. And Alderman Burke said that Chico is the most qualified to be mayor. That last one was a negative, by the way. Although, actually, you know, the truth is that Chico met Burke right around the same time that Ron and I met, because I was covering City Hall for the Tribune. Ron was at the mayor's office, and Gary Chico was working for Ed Burke, who was then, and frankly only until recently, head of the Finance Committee. Bill Daley, he was President Obama's chief of staff, former U.S. Secretary, and a Daley. Again, that last one may also be considered a challenge. Amaya Enya, policy consultant. She's young, she's got a very good face with African American and rappers, although Chance was a no-show at a rally that she had yesterday, so maybe there's a falling out, who knows. Her big negative, though, was that the Tribune did a story noting her financial problems, which included underreported income tax, a tax lien, and a lawsuit, to which she said that should have nothing to do with her running for mayor. So there you go. Bob Fioretti, former second ward alderman, ran for mayor in 2015, state senator in 2016, president of the Cook County Board in 2017. On the downside, he's become a perennial candidate, so expect to see him next time around. LaShawn Ford, state representative, 8th District, very strong West Side black base. Something that he may have to deal with is that back in 2014, he took a deal with the feds for a misdemeanor rather than 17 felony counts. Remember what I said about once you're elected, things tend to happen. Jerry Joyce, former assistant state's attorney, has a very, very strong South Side base. He's sort of the South Side Jerry McCarthy, who's up on the north side. And Jerry Joyce is also married to a Hispanic, so the base is a little bit broader. John Kozlar, two-time aldermanic candidate, and he pretty much has a lack of operation. That's his big failing. One of his big failings. Lori Lightfoot made her reputation with the Laquan McDonald case. She does have a very wide black and liberal base, which includes gays. Her biggest challenge is Tony Preckwinkle. They're drawing from a lot of the same people. Then we have, Gary McCarthy. He's conservative. His strongest base was conservative whites. The trouble that he has is explaining away the Laquan McDonald incident, which happened under his watch. So if that happened under his watch, if he's mayor, you have to weigh those things. Susanna Mendoza, very strong coalition base. A lot of Rom's allies are working with her. How many remember Jane Byrne? Ooh, okay. Jane Byrne's daughter, Kathy Byrne, is Susanna's campaign manager. So, dipping way back into Chicago history, Susanna is strong with the labor unions, and she's also strong with Mike Madigan. On the negative side, she's strong with Mike Madigan. and Susanna, a very nice person, fun to be around. Played soccer as a girl. I don't know if you know that. She got hit with a real big 1-2 punch. One Burke, two my high school buddy, Danny Solis. More stories there. And she hasn't recovered from that. When I gave a similar presentation to your Rotary group in November, Tony was running number one, and right with her second was Susanna. But after Burke and after Solis, Susanna's lost a lot of ground. Then we have Toni Preckwinkle. She is the president of the Cook County Board. She is chairman of the Cook County Democratic Party. She's very strong with unions, strong with progressives, and she has been in the lead since coming in. Her weakness is her fundraising may have leveled off, and she is running first, so everybody's gunning for her. Neil Solis Griffin, young, black, business experience, all that is very positive. Funding is a major shortfall. Paul Vallis, he has education and budget credentials, but frankly, he never met a budget he didn't like. As much as he has talked about how budgets should be fixed, when he was at City Hall under previous mayors, he signed off on the budget that he now complains about. Willie Wilson, millionaire businessman. He's gotten a lot of TV debate exposure. He lacks a broad base, similar but opposite from the base that McCarthy has, and I'll explain that in a minute. Before ranking their chances, so if you want to take your phones out to get ready to speed dial your bookies, get ready. But before we talk about the chances, let's talk about Chicago and the profile and what it looks like. Based on the U.S. Census estimates from July of 2017, Chicago had a population of 2.7 million, slightly up from 2010. Whites, blacks, and Hispanics, as you can see, are roughly about 30%. So if you do the math, and you don't have to be a math whiz here, you need some kind of coalition if you're going to get a majority of this vote. And that's what some candidates are challenged with. Keep that in mind. Now, we've talked about the census, the demographics. Let's look at some political strategies. What's needed to win? You have to have a very strong coalition base. If your base is all Hispanic, that's not enough. If it's all white, again, not enough. If it's all African American, there's got to be some overlap, otherwise it's not going to work. You have to have a campaign operation. You have to have people that love you, that are sworn to you, that are willing to go in front of trucks for you. And they need to be all over. One of the reasons that Dorothy Brown did not get enough ballot signatures is because she paid people to collect her signatures. And even then she came in short. So when the election lawyers looked at several petition sheets with 15 signatures on each page and saw that they were all in the same handwriting, all with the same colored pen, they said, you know what, maybe we should check these first. And then you have to have a resume. You have to be somebody, not necessarily nobody that nobody sent, but you got to have something besides your name. You have to have street cred. Okay, big deal, you came from Yale, what good is that here? You have to do something here. You have to have resources. Now, if I was more cynical, and it's hard to believe I'm not there yet, I would have started out with resources, because frankly, it costs a lot just to get all these other things going. And then finally, most importantly, believe it or not, you need 50% plus one vote to be elected mayor of Chicago. With 14 candidates, it's going to be hard for one candidate to get 50% plus one vote. So what's going to happen is February 26th is going to come around, and the election results will show you 2 people that were the top vote getters. They will have a runoff, which will be April 2nd. And then Chicago's 46th mayor will be sworn in at noon, Monday, May 20th. So if you have a present for Ron, you've got up until 11:59 to give it to him. Okay, now let's talk chances. This is the fun part. And please keep in mind, this is nothing personal. This is just the way it rolls out when you take a look at base, operation, resume, street cred, resources, and some recent polls. I broke them into 2 tiers, 7 in each tier. Tier 2 is what I call Tier 2, and if I were a TV game show host, I would tell these 7 individuals, hey, thanks for playing. Number 14, Celeste Griffin. Number 13, John Kozlar. 12, Jerry Joyce. 11, Bob Fioretti. Now, I talk about resources. They're not a silver bullet. The company that was put together by bluesman Buddy Guy gave Bob $500,000. And goodbye, Bob. LaShawn Ford, number 10. Now, a couple of surprises. Number 9, Gary McCarthy. He got a lot of TV press early on when he was running against the guy that fired him. And he was always smiling, talking how he was going to win. But he couldn't build a coalition. Remember what I talked about, the demographics of the city? He also wasn't able to get enough funding, and he never had a winning strategy. You might also know, if you've ever talked to him, that he's got that old Bronx mentality of always wanting to get in a match, always taking somebody on. And that's not always a smart move. For instance, he ran into some controversy recently with the Fraternal Order of Police. He may actually have lost the support of some of the people that served under his command. He said, quote, "They can't be operating like it's 1950 in Birmingham, Alabama." Paul Vallis. Many of you heard him last month. He's very good at presenting a lot of weighty facts to back him up. He would have been, if he was on the day team in high school, they would have loved him. Would have been an A student. But he has too many facts, too heavy, and it's hard to follow. In politics, when you're pitching in politics, less is always more. There's also a federal class action suit against the Paul Vallis campaign because a lot of people were getting text messages from him that they didn't ask for. So there's that. On the upside, maybe, last week he was endorsed by Sean Penn, the activist actor who also supported the late leftist Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez. So there you go. Now, I did those from bottom up. The final 7 we're going to do from top down. No surprise. Toni Preckwinkle leads right now. The latest polls show her at, remember I said we needed 51%? She leads with 16%. She's got 16%. She needs a little more. She's been first and she entered, as I said. Bill Daley has 14%, and he's been closing in on her for the last couple weeks. He's come from behind. Some tried to write him out as dead on arrival because of the Daley name, but he's a charming guy. He's got a very strong business background, and he's able to raise a lot of money. He's also been supported, endorsed by former former DNC chairman, Howard Dean. You remember him probably. Yeah! Never remember Dave Michigan! That guy. Congressman Bobby Rush. And last week, Bill Daley was endorsed by former Governor Al Gore. I'm sorry, former VP Al Gore. And Bill Daley also got a $25,000 check from one of the Cubs owners, Tom Ricketts. Now let me check my time there. A quick 30-second aside on the Cubs. If you think that their team is inconsistent, you know, like last September, there were 5 games in the league going into September, and then they collapse. Well, the family's all over the place because, well, we won't even talk about the dad. You know, he has some issues. But Tom backed Daley, and the sister Lori backed Susanna Mendoza. So even they can't get together on this. And then we have Gary Chico, third place, 11%. He's running third. And he made some strong early gains and is holding on. Then there is a three-way tie for fourth place. Each of them has 7%. Amara Enya, so did Dorothy Brown help her or hurt her? Lori Lightfoot, who was endorsed by the Chicago Sun-Times. Susanna Mendoza, who, as I said, started in second and has fallen back. And running 7th, Willie Wilson. Money helps. He's got signs all over the place. And last week, he was endorsed by the Young Republicans. So there's the lineup. You can go ahead and text your bookie. Don't interrupt. Yeah. But I just want to close by saying, no one here's voted yet, and that's okay, but if you are a U.S. citizen living in Chicago, make sure you're registered to vote. And then when we're at election time, so remember, again, you're in Chicago, so vote at least once. Thank you. Okay, let's go to Q&A, and you can cut the Q&A whenever you need to cut it.
You good?
Yes, sir.
You know, you have 13, 14 candidates up there, and they run the whole range. It kind of looks like a Republican ticket, and then somebody came out of nowhere. Who's that first?
That's going to come out of nowhere? You know, some would say, well, it's not. It's going to be up towards the top. It'll be somebody from the 7. And the one that came out of nowhere to be in the top 7, I have to say, is Willie Wilson. But, you know, the guy's a shrewd businessman. You don't become a millionaire. Well, you can become a millionaire if your father gives you $1 million. But you can also become a millionaire if you work your butt off, which he did. And he's the surprising one. But if you drive down Michigan, if you drive on Devon, Peterson, he's got signs everywhere. And I don't know if you all watch all of the debates. I sort of have to, which is why they pay me the big bucks. But I was telling Ron, I sincerely applauded Willie Wilson because he was on a debate with Mike Flannery, who talked about can't get a word in edgewise. He won't let you talk at all. But anyway, Flannery was cutting people off, and Willie was the last one, and it's the usual, okay, fine words, 30 seconds. So Willie started with a prayer. I want the good Lord to bless the station and the people that put this debate together. I want to have everyone in the audience. And he went on and on, and who is going to interrupt a prayer? Come on! So that kind of moxie got it.
Manuel, you talked about polling. What kind of polling's done for this election, and how frequently?
So when I have a candidate that I'm working with, and we're working on their budget, I say you seriously want to poll, have a private poll for yourself at least twice. You want to have an early poll to see how much ground you have to make up, and then you have to have a poll towards the end, ideally 2 more polls, to see if what you've been doing is correct. So some of the candidates can't afford polls. Many of the candidates have their own polls that they take as much as they can. Usually it's not more than 2 in a season. I was able to get some of those, a couple of those. And then the Sun-Times did a poll, and also Derek Blakely at CBS was able to look at someone's poll. And then you mash them all together. So there's obviously not as many polls as there are in a presidential race. But it's enough to get a good sense.
Reliable?
Yeah, fairly reliable. Any more questions? Yes, sir.
You spoke about, and we'll make that the last question, since I get to ask my questions. You mentioned that Mendoza was, in the beginning, was number 2, neck to neck.
Correct.
And little political news or something such as the Ed Burke thing happened and knocked somebody off. Can you speak on the timing and whether it's relation to the mayor race and how that happened since it's been the first case in 2019? Has that been really?
Well, you know, as a former journalist for 50 years in Chicago, it was always curious to see the timing of different things. The feds will tell you that timing has nothing to do with anything. The Burke one was rather interesting because it was so close, not only so close to an election, but close to his election. And it was also kind of like an early lead because the feds asked for another 6 months so they could put documents together. Usually they do that at the beginning before they pull the trigger. So they had enough to make an indictment, but it was 1 count of attempted extortion. So if you listen to the tape, it may be questionable. The reason it hurt Mendoza so much is she's, you know, Tony knows Burke. He gave her $10,000 and steered more her way. She hired his son, who had been under investigation. Arguably, Susanna's a little closer. She got married at Burke's house. She was married by Mrs. Burke, Supreme Court Justice, and Danny Solis and her worked together a long time. So that was, she took the hit because of that, and she hasn't recovered it.
Why did Manuel decide not to run, and what's his future?
2 good questions. The first one I get asked a lot. And I would sincerely say a couple of things. I mean, one is that he's been at it for a long time. He's been involved in politics on a daily basis for years and years and years, going back to when he was in Congress. And then he became chief of staff. So there's a lot of that. And part of it is it's time to just relax and take a breath and spend some time with the family. That's been big. There's probably also, so he would have won. I don't doubt that he would have won. But there's also some thought that it's going to be super hard to run Chicago, whoever the mayor is, because among other things, they're going to have to deal with an additional, on top of everything that they have now, an additional $5 billion in pension shortfalls over like the next 3 years. What's he going to do? He's not going to run for president. The most likely one that I have heard is that when Dick Durbin decides to move on, Ron will probably run for the U.S.
With so many candidates running, what is your projection on the percentage of the voting population that will actually vote?
Oh, another good question. This is a good table. It reminds me of my poli-sci classes. Surprisingly, going back to the last mayoral election, when there was a runoff with Chewy and with Ron, less than half of all of the registered voters in Chicago actually voted. So with this one, the runoff there was more. But I think for this one, you're going to have more because there's so many candidates. I mean, you know, how could you not know a candidate personally? You know? So there's that, and plus you've got everybody running in the wards. The other thing, by the way, I noticed nobody here admitted to having voted yet. I will say this to give you incentive. No, I won't pay you. That's illegal. But I will say that it's like one of the shortest ballots I've ever seen. You vote for mayor, you vote for clerk, you vote for treasurer, you vote for alderman. That's it. Where are the 36 judges on page 1? They're not there. It'll be quick. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
And I'll be honest with you.